Welcome to GW Insights, episode 2. My name's Reuben. I'll be your host today. Before we get started, let me introduce you to my colleague and GW's technology director, Mark Simpson. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Reuben. Yeah, good to speak to you again.
No, all good. Becoming a regular thing. So just to tee today up, we're going to be talking again about the 7 common problems that we see in legacy transformation projects. Really outlining those challenges individually that project leaders really have to be prepared for. And hopefully today will be really helpful for them. In the following weeks, we're really going to deep dive into those solutions. So it's all chronologically set up to kind of make sense. So should we get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds
okay. Well, problem 1, I've got down as the business is run out of time. And I think the interesting thing about that is the jump off point from our first session was end game. So talk us through that.
Yeah, no, in our last session, we talked about why legacy becomes such a problem, right? And why that people have not invested in solving tech debt, why people have left the growing of the application with the business out for short-term technical kind of goals. And what that's led to is suddenly there's a ticking time bomb there we talked about, and suddenly, IT leaders and business leaders have got this deadline where they need to replace their legacy systems. It could be regulatory, it could be actually that it's out of support, it could be that now they've reached the limit where they just cannot implement the business change on it. So suddenly they've got a deadline, they've got to suddenly move fast in a problem that often hasn't been looked at for many years. And we always think about with sort of adding IT value and adding business value to our solutions, that we've got this triangle of scope, time, quality. Normally something has to give on that triangle. It's a bit of a molding of the 3. So with these legacy challenges, what you end up is often fixed time, fixed scope, because you can't degrade the solution. If you are going to migrate a legacy solution, you can't take things away from the business. And of course, quality that you can't compromise on. So suddenly you've got this problem that, you haven't tackled this for years maybe, and suddenly you've got this time problem, in essence, that you've got to replace it. And how people approach with that then is that they almost look for the silver bullets then, really. That they look for how they can actually, kind of do this quick with high quality. They'll start enforcing like for like on the scope. They will start to look at how they can automate something. And what tends to happen there is you get the old structures and the old problems in a new technology. So you need to know the old as well as the new, there, which gives you, it's your own problems. And really what you do is you almost bury the skeletons in the closet of that application because you haven't got the time, the capacity, the budgets to kind of look at that and to actually try and come up with a re-architecting and a re-platforming of that solution. You're trying to just migrate it, like for like. So that time, that pressing time bomb, is kind of causing you to take decisions in that legacy project that turns it into just a legacy migration rather than a kind of a transformation project, I think.
You can almost see how that plays out in the boardroom as well. There's a film called Margin Call about Lehman Brothers and just the explosion of it. And that moment when Jeremy Irons realizes they've just got to sell their dud shares. It feels like that moment, right? Where they've just got, we're all out of time and we've just got to make some real bad decisions.
Yeah, and remember, a lot of these legacy systems are critical to the business. That's why they've stayed around for so long. So suddenly making those kind of decisions on your critical systems because of a history of lack of investment of it or a history of taking the wrong decisions is not a good place to be in, really. And there should be a better way, really. And maybe over the next few weeks we'll explore that.
Right, problem 2. The dreaded black box application, we've called it.
Yeah.
Talk us through, how that works out and plays.
Yeah, and I think I've got a lot of experience of trying to look at and understand and decide how to transform legacy applications. And what I always find is that, the architecture and the design of these and the documentation of that design is often done, many, many years ago. And often the documentation was great 20 years ago, but it hasn't been maintained, right? So to find out what that application does, you can't trust that documentation. And we hear a lot, well, we think it's right, but we don't trust the documentation. If you go and look at the tests, those were the tests that were ran when it was first put into production. Are they maintained? Are they automated? Can you rely on a regression path to say this is exactly what the rules in the system does? So you end up having something where you kind of can't trust the documentation or the full test coverage. The knowledge is in people's heads, but it's on code that has been written a long time ago and maybe not been maintained, refactored, technical data, adhered to over the last years. So you've got this kind of what we call like a black box system where you're scared to almost look into it to find out what you'll find, what skeletons and kind of hidden complexities will be there. So, we use the term often software archaeology. It's like trying to find out what the original intention was, what it does now, and what the gaps are. We hear a lot of we see a lot of examples where teams have turned more agile and have taken their legacy systems and just, incorporating small add-ons to it to try and add value. And the kind of the technique there is for the coders documentation, which is great on a well-architected, well-structured new product. Yep. But when you're trying to take that approach on a 20-year-old kind of legacy system, it becomes a lot harder to work out what it's doing. So I think this is one of the big challenges of legacy modernization is trying to actually really understand what that application does, where the logic is sitting. Often, we use the term monoliths. I did a presentation at a recent conference on sort of breaking down the monolith and understanding it. And, in our mind, you've got to do that if you can have a sustainable product at the end of it. But a lot of legacy modernization projects just treat it as a black box, just say, let's find out what inputs we've got to give and what outputs, and let's just keep it as is.
Yeah.
So,
I think almost where you get into, and I think we'll get into the fat of this in the following weeks, is the re-engineering process almost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And I see a lot of large initiatives whereby the new teams on the new technologies are doing the kind of, the engineering good practices and trying to build a sustainable application. And then that company or that initiative will set up a separate team for legacy, and a separate team, a BAU team, to try and, kind of bring that legacy into the new world. So there's always a bit of a disconnect there. And it's always seen as, well, just do just what's needed on the legacy. And what is always missed is the level of hidden complexity that you have in legacy systems, big structured monoliths with code at the wrong layers, validation code repeated and maybe inconsistent, business logic not easily, kind of extracted. So, then suddenly the hardest jobs are in that legacy kind of BAU team, and you're expecting them to just offer you out some APIs or something. So they take the easiest solutions they can, either run it through a code automation or wrap the code, etc. And the re-engineering doesn't happen in the areas that you really need that re-engineering.
Yeah. And sliding into a slightly different topic, those complexities and the complexities of having all of those separated teams that aren't essentially working together, that's before we even start talking about onshore versus offshore, right? If those teams are in other time zones and whatever, it's even more difficult to get an organic, well-structured team play, right?
Yeah, and it's always, we always have this vision of sort of multi-stack, multi-skilled developers who understand many technologies, across all of the stack. And the reality is that that's very difficult, to be the jack of all trades, across all technologies and understand legacy and the new technologies is hard. We try and have a kind of a philosophy of T-shaped developers where people are broad, but then we'll have certain specialities, right? So in reality, on a legacy modernization project or a legacy transformation project, you need multi-skilled teams rather than just individuals. So you need teams of individuals who understand the legacy, who are skilled at trying to extract out that business logic, who know the new technologies and understand what is needed to be able to implement it in the new technology, have great design and architecture skills, and can break down problems, right? And you don't often get that by saying, well, we're going to give part of it to a company who knows the legacy, part of it who know new design. You've got to bring those teams together in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so we're on to problem 3, and it's a bit of a mouthful. We've called it the big ball of mud that is monolithic architecture. So give us the spiel on that and what it leads to, really.
Yeah, and I think we've seen lots of analogies of saying how, kind of. I've heard people call it the snowball effect of like, an IT system growing over time. We hear spaghetti a lot. When we used to work a lot with kind of integration technologies, service-oriented architecture that was trying to sort out the layers in your architecture, people would say, take a bowl of spaghetti and make it into a layered lasagna. We think all of these analogies, they're good, but tracing out and breaking up spaghetti is actually easy if you take it step by step, right? The challenge we've got with real legacy monolithic applications where code's been put all of the layers is it's not as easy to just trace through one bit of code and decide what to do. It's all mixed up. It's almost compacted together like a ball of mud trying to break that down, so you've got to think slightly differently about kind of how to approach it. And people have left these applications without either left them without much maintenance going on or have just applied kind of, BAU maintenance, regulatory change without ever really thinking about, is this the way that the application should be structured now to meet the business domains and the business initiatives that we've got, right? So you've got logic mixed throughout the application. You've got some digital code, customer-facing code mixed with back-office code. You've got rules and validation all separately. So this makes it, really difficult to break up. And it makes it really difficult to just do an automated transformation to say, take this ball of mud and turn it into a well-structured, application. Take this spaghetti and turn it into a lasagna. So, I think that's the sort of the root of what the problem is, right?
I think the thing is as well, what I think about, we talked about it a lot last week, not only are you getting incrementally left behind by your competitors that are doing it the right way, but you've just got the inability to innovate quickly and solve problems quickly. Just everything takes longer, everything costs you more, and also you're frustrating the best people in your business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you want to innovate and if you want to try things and if you want to accelerate your delivery, to get your products out, your product change out quicker to your clients, then you've got to have trust on that change of that product. And what we tend to find is there's not the trust of change. These applications are fragile. They don't have clear, structured tests. You can't just change the UI often without having to change some code that may impact an integration or may impact some business rules. So change just slows down within it, and I think that is often to do with, not the skills of the team, but the architecture that has been ended up with, really. And the only real way to approach that is to change that architecture, to extract that logic and to restructure that logic, not to do a big bang replacement of saying, let's take all of that code in one go, roll it out on a new technology.
So we're on to problem 4. Quite a simple one, this, but really, really crucial. We've called it integrations and dependencies. So talk to me about the history you've got with that and the problems that it causes.
Yeah, I think whenever you look at any application, whether it be a newly rolled out one or one that's been in place for 20 years, in a large enterprise, there will be integrations. We don't have large ERP systems that do everything for your business anymore. There will be specialist products. If you look at someone's enterprise architecture, there'll be 100 products on it. They're all, interlinked and interrelated. So when we have a challenge of looking at what to do with the legacy, we can't take it in isolation. We've got to look at the boundaries, the touch points to other systems, the integrations to these other systems.
Yeah.
These are dependencies. There will be things that we are dependent on from that application. There'll be things that other applications are dependent on from us. So when you're looking at what to do to re-architect and to modernize and to transform that legacy application, you have to take in the whole picture of all of the integrations that we've got. And that just adds a multitude of complexity to the solutions often. Right.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the more simple points of today, actually. It's quite a quick one, but I think if you've got fantastic architecture from the get-go, it makes that so much easier, right? So you can make great decisions at the very beginning of a project. Once you've got the problem that you want to solve, you're on the right track, you're on the right road.
What I've seen a lot of in my history, and we've worked with companies that have definitely fell into this trap, where the integration itself becomes a product. And I've even seen terms of integration as a product. And what that term is meant to mean is get a toolkit of tools and code and platforms to help you integrate to applications. But what tends to happen is organizations will put an integration team in place that their sole focus is making sure data flows from system A to system B to system Z, right? And all of the things between it. So that integration becomes a bottleneck in its own right. It becomes a product that needs knowledge, and suddenly that integration product, if you need knowledge in that as a business, you need knowledge of all of your business areas. It's kind of the central nervous system that you need, to maintain even more than the products itself. And that's a trap I've seen a lot of people fall into, where the things that actually go wrong is the integrations. They are storing a lot of state. They're orchestrating a number of integration steps, and they need specialists just looking after the integration layer. Which, if you take a step back and look at it, it feels crazy. How have we got in this situation where our customer-facing digital system is failing, not because of that system, not because of the back office system, but because the integration has become a bottleneck and we're queuing up requests and we're trying to persist all the data. And I think that probably the single number one effect of integration systems going down is the monitoring of the systems and the exceptions that they are monitoring. So if it's the exceptions that are taking a system down, imagine that sort of virtuous circle that the integration team have to deal with, right? So when we're looking at legacy systems, we haven't got to just think about just replacing that one system. We've got to think about what the right way to architect the integrations to other systems are. Yeah, well, one failing I see people think about is they just think about all the lines and the data flows to the systems. If it's a Lego of integrated systems, they just think about kind of the prongs on the Lego. Don't know what you must know what they're called, Reuben.
I haven't. I know if you tread on them, it hurts.
Yeah, those things, right? So if you tread on that data flow, it kind of hurts. If you get it wrong, it definitely hurts your enterprise architecture. But they just think about the data flow rather than the applications and the needs of the applications. and they don't turn it around to think about, well, what am I dependent on? What do I want from my dependent systems? How can I have tests to ensure that that is still working after I've upgraded my legacy system? Separate from where people are dependent on you, where non-breaking changes become really important. You can't upgrade the legacy system and break everyone who's dependent on you. So you've got to start thinking about separating out your code to make sure that you can absorb, changes in the legacy to make sure you don't break things. So, there's a definite set kind of design and architecture you need to think about there. And the answer isn't one big monolithic integration product in my view. Even though over the last 10, 15 years, I've worked on a lot of those products,
Yeah. Okay, Mark. So very quickly, we're on to problem number 5. And I think for us, it's the single most critical element of any project. It's the thing that in our DNA, it always comes first, and it's always at the forefront of our mind. And that thing is a small little word, data. Talk to us about the importance of data and why it trips up so many enterprises.
Yeah, and obviously I could talk for days and days of the importance of data in general. So what I really want to focus in is some of the challenges if you don't treat data as a first-class citizen in legacy modernization and transformation products. So, if you've had an application running for 20 years, you've been applying rules, you've been given a user interface for people to interact with, but the thing you've been collecting is the data. That's the thing that you're persisting in, maybe a database or a file store. That's your gold, really. That's your treasure, right? That's how you can prove what you've done from an auditing perspective. That's how you can feed the next generation of rules. That's how you can look at what products were resonating in the market, how people are using your systems. So data is really the gold there. And what I see a lot of people making mistakes on is they say, yeah, data's important, so we will, again, create another stream for data. And what do they call it? They call it data migration, right? So we see this as one of the biggest failings of any kind of legacy migration project, that they just separate out data as a data migration stream. Because what tends to happen then is that stream waits until the new data structures are designed. They analyze the old data structures and they just look at how can we just move that data, right? So just transfer your goal to a new safe on that, rather than taking the opportunity to say, well, how was our data structured 20 years ago when this application was first envisaged and designed? How should our data be structured now? Really understand it. What data have we got in there? And I would say with anyone who's looking at this, first think about extracting, before you even touch moving the data, have a strategy of how you're going to understand that data, how you're going to extract out of it the logical representation of that data. Does this still mean something to the business users? So almost take a step out with the data first before you put it into the new systems, and really think about how should our data be designed for the future, not just for today. I see a lot of, and I've seen this in a lot of financial institutions, especially if they've kind of, acquired new brands or merged, that they take the data off as is and almost like have a closed book and an open book system and just keep the closed book as it was. And it's almost like locked away. It's there in case you need it. But that's the heritage of your business. That is the inheritance that you leave in for the next generation of applications. Here's the data. This is how people were using the system. This is what the rules were. So, yeah. So I think two failings: not think of data as the critical element, and starting data migration talk later, after you've done it. It always ends up on the critical path. It always gets compromised, right? And it always prevents kind of the staged rollout of new applications, and leads people to say, well, it has to be big bang because that's the only way we can do the data migration, right?
Yeah.
So I think in the future sort of chapters of this, we'll talk about some techniques to really care for your data and how to bring it out. But I definitely want to leave this one with everyone thinking about, don't think of data just as a second thought.
Yeah, and I think, I've been reading a lot of white papers in the last couple of weeks for a round table that we've got next week with some tech leaders. And I think the one thing that's really going to change the game very, very quickly and help accelerate is AI and automation. I think there's so much that can be done. How do you see, if we just have a little rich snippet of the changes that AI can have with what we do with our data, how quickly do you see that change in the game?
Well, I'd almost look at it from a different angle. AI is nothing without data. The intelligence is gained from analysing the data and trying to look for patterns in that data and trying to predict, right? So making that data available, whether it be 20 years old data or, last week's data, and learning about that transition is absolutely key within that. And what a lot of people think about or structure their projects from a data perspective on a legacy modernisation is they'll either they'll look to just transform that data into the new structures just for that new UI application, or they'll end up saying that's not feasible. Let's build a new UI on top of the existing data structures. And they're almost missing a trick that if they understand what data's there, get it structured for kind of a customer-facing interactive system, but also for analytics, also for AI, large learning modules to process, also to identify events that have occurred and looking for trends and patterns. That's where the gold is in an application. You're going to replace the UI, very rapidly. You'll replace a lot of the logic and the processes and the services, but the data will persist. It's rare that the actual data structures, the logical data structures that a business is based on, do not change that often. The interaction to users and the processes and how you use that data changes, but the core of a banking system, of a transaction and a current account and different products stays fairly similar from a structure point of view. And it's a shame. I find it a real shame when we do legacy modernization, or when we see legacy modernization projects with clients, that they treat data as you just need to move it across to the new system, rather than how now can we extract and leverage that data, and then they can start, and often this will be the same organization that's trying to innovate with AI by producing a chatbot or, something simple, and understanding why it feels like just FAQ and people are saying, it's not really got much intelligence, it's just giving me answers. It's because it hasn't got access to the right data, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. So, Mark, we're on problem 6. We're nearly at the end of the road. We've called this one business change freeze. And we talked a little bit last week about the business getting into a hole, calling off all of the dogs in the business and just focus on fixing systems. So this is kind of a nice follow-up to that. So talk to us about the business change freeze and what it means.
Yeah, and I think we talked earlier about a lot of these legacy systems are almost like ticking time bombs. You're running out of kind of, the amount of times you can extend support with a given supplier. So often it feels like these projects are forced on top of the business, that it is IT or finance or the governance within the organization saying you must move off this system and move to a new system. And the business will be going, but this is critical, I'm running my business on it. And the projects become about mitigating risk, not adding value, right? And at times, IT have got a bad name for focusing just on risk and compliance and regulation and to be slow rather than focusing on business change. And I think that's changed a lot over the last 5 to 10 years. A lot of great books about how to structure teams to make sure that they are aligned with business value, kind of streamlined teams that are measured and are working in concert with the business, not against it. And that's great, and that's the approach that should be taken. But how can you apply that when you've got a large legacy system that is going to take in the planner's mind many months to deliver, right? And what you can't do is say to the business, tread water for 6 months, 12 months while we change the legacy system. And if I was in the business and any IT team came to me and say, we're going to have to pause adding any business value because we need to spend 6 months kind of bringing the application up to a certain standard, I'd be asking them to go back to the drawing board and rethinking those plans. We cannot kind of freeze business value for 6 months or 12 months while we change the application, right? Any business now, especially if they've got a sort of a digitally facing, arm to that, any freeze will severely hamper the business, right? So we have to, within IT architecture and IT planning, we need to find a way of being able to continually add business value as we change these legacy systems. And, Big Bang is not the way to do that, to go away and come back with, here's the new system, right? We've got to break it down. We've got to incrementally change it. We've got to make sure the business understand the value of changing that legacy system. Now, that might be opportunity cost of these are the things you can't do if you stay on this system, or they might be very sort of value focused of here's the innovation we're going to bring as part of that. And this is where I get disappointed when transformation programs end up turning into just a like for like, right? Now, if like for like is the minimum viable product and the first thing you do, yeah, okay, maybe that's acceptable, but it shouldn't be the vision. It shouldn't be the end game for that transformation to give the business what they had before, and when we do a transformation and a migration of saying we're going to take from A and we're just going to upgrade to B, it kind of loses the opportunity to add value as you go along. If you're breaking down that architecture, and if you're saying in this area now, we've separated out your digitally facing system, let's work with your digital directors and your commercial teams about how better you want to engage with your customers, get your goals in and see how we can do that as we transform your legacy, you're a lot closer to almost getting the business on board with why you want to transform the legacy. If it becomes, just about compliance and, you're turning IT into a cost center, you're just saying, give us this funding and we'll maintain the same level of service. And that's a slippery slope into the business kind of looking at different applications, shadow IT, low code applications. And then you've got the integration headache of fitting those in. So that joint team still applies to legacy transformation products, I think.
I think what's really interesting in that from a client perspective, so, we deliver for our clients in conjunction with them as a partnership. I think what we're talking about is taking those small chunks and cutting them up. There's a joy in it, right? Because we get to see the incremental wins. We get to build trust with our key strategic partners. And I think, without blowing our own trumpet, we are known as deliverers, right? That's exactly what we do. And we know that with the other kind of global SIs that we deal with other clients, it's not always seen the same, So I think getting into that rhythm of delivering successful products that we can iterate on in a quick fashion is absolutely key, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's how you iterate through this. And I worked with a large organization probably 10 years ago now, actually, who launched a large transformation product with a large kind of systems integrator. And they had the analogy of changing the wheels on the car as it was moving, not doing a pit stop. And whilst the kind of the aim of that message was right, it's different in a digital world, really. We do not need to change those wheels while the car's moving. We can run things in parallel, we can build an MVP of a new car and maybe transfer the engine across or transfer parts of it. We do a lot of work with products like Launch Darkly for feature flagging to make sure that our product set can meet two needs, an old requirement and a new requirement, or can roll things out gradually, and that is really, really common, feature flagging in new product developments. People rarely think about it within kind of legacy transformations. They just want to get a like for like, get the project done and move on. Whereas if we think about, well, how can we have the legacy coexisting with the new systems, and how can we transition across as it adds value to the business, that all of that planning, in my experience, is well worth it, and make sure you add business value as you move along, and and allow the business to iterate with you, to that new system.
No, I think you're right. Thank you for that, Mark. Thank you. So, Mark, we've come to a close. We're on problem 7. And the way I've dressed this up, it sounds a little bit Jilly Cooper, if I'm honest. It's called project complexity, but here's the Jilly Cooper bit. We've called it a resistance to going under the covers, right? So talk to us about this project complexity and what it makes organizations do and think like.
Yeah, sure. I don't think I'd be able to count the number of times I've gone in as a consultant to an organization, and they've had a team who are experts at legacy transformation or automated migration, who have done their discovery phase, done their analysis, and present the answer that this is too complex, or this is too complex to fit in with our automation, or we recommend you just wrap this system because, there's too much risk in breaking it down, and it's like, yeah, I think we could have told you that at day one. I always remember someone from a large company that will remain nameless, that flew up over their experts in this sort of legacy analysis tool, right? And they spent a week, interviewing the business, putting their, sensors into the application, tracing it all through, and then presented it to the execs and put up a slide to show the complexity of this legacy system. And it was like one of those spirographs that just had lines everywhere. And I always remember one of the senior managers saying, but I can't see anything from this. This is just a ball of mess or something. And the conclusion from the consultant was, exactly, that's what we want to show you. And it's like, well, that's great, but what's the answer here? So that project turned into very much a big bang, very much taking the current data structures because the problem was too hard to solve, wrapping it round with a new system, right? They had a separate data migration stream. So all of these things through the first 6 questions that I've said maybe is bad practice, they ended up falling into because the problem was too hard to architect it properly and do it properly. I think you can guess, Reuben, whether that project was successful or not, and how long it took compared to what was planned originally. All right. So what tends to happen when people find that the complexity is there and is more than they first envisaged, is they tend to have a pursuit then for simplistic solutions. They tend to look for those silver bullets. They tend to either kind of look at something that can automate that for them, but automate it as a whole, not automate it by extracting out the value, redesigning it via a step, and then generating out new code, more a one-off simple transformation. We've seen a lot where we've got old, maybe Java systems for the UI on old technology, and there'll be automated tools that will transform that to maybe a new JavaScript UI. What tends to happen is the resultant code, you need to know the old structures, the Java structures, all the Java class structures, as well as the new kind of packages that are in the new, React solution maybe. So there's suddenly this T-shaped developer has to be an expert in a very old style UI and a new style UI to be able to make the change. So, it's never a good plan to just do that kind of press a button automation within it.
And I think that's a great landing point to kind of finish on, really, because next time, you said it then about that experience that you'd had. Well, what are the answers, right? So the next time we talk, we're really going to talk about how to set yourself up for success. And I think that's going to be a really, really valuable session on just some very simple things that you can put in place that means the foundations are there. So, Mark, thanks ever so much for your time today. I think you'll be able to comment below, anybody watching this, to talk about your own projects or your own problems. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Thanks, Reuben.